Hello everyone, we're back with the second season of I Hope This Message Finds You Well, a podcast on curating, where we, myself, Eloise Sweetman, and my friend and colleague Kris Dittel, talk to curators about their approach to curating, how they began and what they love about the profession. Today's episode is with us.
In this kickoff episode, we return to our initial conversation in 2020 and discuss what we have learned from our guests in season 1 and what has changed in our personal and professional lives since then.
How many months has it been since our last confession?
Yeah, it's been 2 years almost. I think we recorded our first episode June 2020, so it's nearly 2 years, which is unbelievable.
It is pretty crazy, actually. Because actually, if you think about it, our first recording was 2 years ago, but we had many discussions beforehand, discussing.
Yes.
So it's could even be longer.
Yes.
Time flies.
Time flies. Yeah. I've been wondering how, the whole incentive of starting this podcast was somehow also brought about the pandemic to wanting to reach out to people and to connect. And I think at the time there was a lot of sentiment in general in the art world, although what is it? About, how things should change and that we need more solidarity and change the way we are working and so on. And I feel there was a lot of energy from that, but then here we are 2 years later and, in a few days everybody will hop on their flights to Venice and everything just goes back to the old routines.
But also that there are all of these, every single big art event seems to be happening this year, like you were saying, that Documenta, Manifesta,
Berlin Biennial. Bergen Assembly.
Yeah.
I do have the calendar though.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all happening, and I think it's also exciting in some ways to see how things might have changed on the ground.
Yeah. Because
right now it feels to me that it feels like nothing has changed, but everything has changed for both of us.
Yeah.
What is curating now? Post-pandemic curating.
Well, is it post?
No. No.
It's a kind of pretense post. Yeah, what is it and what could it be? Because, we've been talking about that earlier, how it changed, or I feel like I'm in some threshold where I feel I am changing things, but also I need to change them much more radically.
Yeah.
The way I work. And it's not just the way I work, but actually where do I want to put my energy into?
No, I understand that. I think for me, at the beginning of the pandemic, I had never been so creative in my life. And I think that was some sort of weird defense mechanism. I had so many good ideas and I was able to produce a lot. And I actually do a lot that I maybe didn't know I could do previously, but now on the other side, I probably have never been so tired, and also I feel like I need to focus, be more precise, and you're so kind of in what you're saying, cut out the noise in some way.
It's also a moment of experimentation, right? What works and what doesn't. But I totally relate to what you've been saying about, having the time, and I've been so focused and I've been reading so much and thinking so much and having this time. I'm one of those privileged people who, during the first and consecutive lockdowns, I just had suddenly all this time. A lot of projects got cancelled or postponed indefinitely, and I don't have a child or anyone to take care of, so I suddenly just had all this time on my hands. And I think it really made me rethink a lot of things and plant a lot of seeds that are kind of happening
Yeah,
now,
that's
or
nice.
kind of excavate a lot of my interests that I never had time for, or I wasn't even so conscious if of them. So anyway, I think that's kind of the good thing.
Yeah.
But then it also made me doubt a lot of the things.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I thought was really good during this time was that I really had time to be in the exhibitions that I curated here in the Netherlands and also for some time in France. But I realized that a lot of that, like talking about this idea of object-oriented curating, I really, really like being in the exhibition. Like, and installing the exhibition is, I think, one of my most favourite, treasured moments of curating. And then the time afterwards. But I also think that I was influenced by the pandemic because I couldn't be in the room with the artist.
But we both had like smaller and bigger life changes also during the past 2 years.
That's true. That's true. But actually, that's really true. I think for season 1, I don't think for all the interviews, I don't know if I was pregnant. But for sure, whilst all the episodes were being released, I was. And all season 2 most of season 2 interviews, I was pregnant, and then with an actual baby, which has definitely been interesting thinking about things that we talked about with Lara and even Joey, and about parenthood in the art world, and how we had these really nice ideas about shared work and how actually it's really been quite an eye-opener on being a parent in the art world. And actually it's not like, I wouldn't say that it's the art world at large, it's just specific people that don't it's kind of sort of like burnout culture.
Yeah.
It's like how lots of people don't understand when somebody's burning out, what that actually means. Yeah. Like they look okay, but in fact they're so it's been interesting, and you've also been on your own journey.
I've been on my own journey. I started writing a lot. That is top secret. I also kind of became sick, which I think in a way, because I had all this time for myself, I kind of finally, from speaking of burnout culture, I maybe allowed myself to rest, and then something that's been bubbling inside me kind of came on the surface. But then also because the last 2 years, well, maybe at least the first year of the last 2 years was a bit on a slower pace, it also allowed me to heal and also to focus on myself and my body that I never really had to such extent before.
Yeah.
And maybe it's similar with motherhood, that suddenly you have like this deeper inner focus that is kind of forced upon you. Yeah. But then how to deal with that in this moment, in this burnout culture, I'm into this word.
Yeah.
But where nobody has an extra capacity to share. No. Where I think that's maybe the problem, that we are always, all of us, constantly on the edge, at the tipping point. And it's already such a balancing act. Like, how can you then give more to someone in, like without essentially, just
being totally consumed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something that I think we talked a lot about in all interviews, is some aspect of care and, labor and like looking after each other in work. But I don't think I really understood what that kind of, I knew what it meant in a different way. Now it's completely different. Like, taking time off isn't just for me not having an exhibition on. It's actually not working at all, which that's completely blowing my mind. Yeah. Like, I've never, I agree with what you were saying. Like, I've never thought about myself in a personal, in my personal life before, like, go to the dentist now and again, but I'd never actually had to kind of look at myself or look inside myself and go, oh my God, like my whole entire life is different now. which is weird because like, and also what I've realized in this time is that I really like working. And I am an auto exploiter.
Yeah, I can relate to that a little bit.
But I think that's the good thing about art, not the good thing in the sense that art is auto-exploiting, which I think it is, but also like art is so much on the edge of everything and the center of everything.
Yeah.
So like it's hard to know when, because if you're not in art, going to an exhibition is leisure.
Yeah.
You know? And so we work in the leisure industry? Like
perhaps. Yeah. But I do like that, not only trashing art, because obviously this idea of self-exploitation also comes from a drive, like it's my way of being in the world.
Yeah.
I've been having so many really fantastic conversations in the past year that I can't let it go because what's left there. Yeah. I think the problem is rather, the kind of systemic issues of the art world. But yeah, as a way of being in the world, I don't think I could change that, even if I would do something else.
Yeah. But where are these issues from in the systemic issues from the artwork? Because like that's one thing that has also surprised me in a way is that like I thought that it would be the larger institutions that would be the one that would kind of like cast me aside or not understand. And in fact, that because of certain regulations, they can't do that. What, like in terms of being like maternity leave and all this sort of stuff. And I would say that I feel like I've been cared for more by, these different institutions than actually like the individual. Well, to a certain extent, because then I have I'm incredibly lucky because I have many caring friends and this sort of thing. But like, I don't know, like where is this deep systemic problem coming from?
I think to one extent from this precarity where, wolf eats wolf kind of mentality very easily arise. But I mean, the art world as such is also, historically built on this kind of, the whole like ethos of the genius and who can afford or allow to be a genius is, very like deep-seated questions that still operates and that the world still operates within that kind of framework or this idea of, even the masterpiece or mastery. Yeah. I think they are just so deeply rooted in the art world that it's just impossible to get rid of them and then just be in it. Yeah, I don't know, maybe it's a bit too abstract what I'm saying, but...
No, I think I understand.
And then, then it does operate on this, like, exceptionalism, but then there are all these like zillions of precarious actors, and I don't mean only like artists and curators and but all these other people who make exhibitions or whatever projects happen.
One of the things we talked about in the past is like disappearing, in parenthood or in sickness, and like I don't feel that I had the chance to disappear. Perhaps I would have liked to have disappeared for 3 months, but I felt like I really couldn't. One, because I was worried that I'd be forgotten, but then immediately I discovered that like people will contact me regardless if they know I'm on maternity leave or not.
Quite the opposite.
Yeah, and so in that way I would say that there is that like it's also an attitude, I think. Yeah. And I wonder, like, and I think I hold a lot of that toxic work behavior myself. Do you know what I mean? Like, I need to do it all.
Yeah. Or this attitude of you're not allowed to take a rest or not allowed to disappear.
Yeah.
Because what will happen?
Yeah. And I really thought that was going to come from external source, and it turns out that it comes from me, which I think is really interesting and scary, actually, because like, okay, it's time to go to therapy, I think.
Aren't we doing that now?
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, I've been also thinking about what changed and what changed the better,
yeah,
or what gives me some hope or a certain, I wouldn't say vision, but an idea where I want to go and where I want to be. And I've been thinking much more about, and I think things I'm working on right now, or I've worked on very recently, are kind of trying to do that to some extent, to work much more collectively and and much more focused on sharing. Also, like, and some forms of exchange that are, not maybe so worked out or not so finished, or actually they don't need to be finished, but that's something that is not centered on an individual, even though, I don't know, this sounds again like so abstract.
But is this like the podcast, for example, like working in that way, or like, you just published a book?
Sure, the podcast, I think with the book as well, which was, I worked on it with an artist who is also my friend, Clementine Edwards. And it was really a true collaboration in a way that I feel a bit of a grief after it's out, rather than, I'm sorry, Clem, I'm happy for it, but I also feel like it kind of ended an era.
Yeah.
But then I also think about, I'm much more interested in being with conversation and sharing with people, which I think I've always been, but I feel I'm much more ready to let go of the pressure to do beautiful things, which I know I can do beautiful things. I mean, this sounds very self-assured, but after years of experience, I can do like beautiful. I don't mean necessarily aesthetically pleasing, but
things that work well.
Things that work well.
I understand that. But I feel like for myself, I've rarely worked on my own now that I think about it. Like, I guess all most of my projects are with a collaborator or multiple collaborators. I really like working with people. And I think that's what's nice about being a curator, because you're also in some ways always working with an artist, but also being, in our case of this podcast, or with Shimmer, or co-curating or whatever, it's nice not to be alone in that way. And I would say that one thing I would have liked from the pandemic is to not teach on my own anymore. Actually, I would like to have a co-teacher, because I think that there is that dynamic, I think, of bouncing ideas off each other like we do, or in other projects. It's like, and also to try and work. I've never worked with a group bigger than 3, actually. It would be interesting to do more. But do you have any ideas of what kind of collective projects you want to do, or are you doing one? I'm
kind of doing something along that line, or trying in a very unfinished format with my colleague Aneta Roskovska. We are doing a project on kinship, and I think we're trying to break up all the kind of boundaries. It's hard. The thing is that it's hard to even fundraise for a project where you don't sell it within a kind of recognizable structure. Like, we are making an exhibition, so then we have to constantly do this, like, concealing and pretending towards the funders, but then presenting it elsewhere differently, which is really exciting. We are doing a kind of monthly study group, which is still this kind of public event. It's still like media, I'm still like a moderator and but I guess it's much more interesting for me to use this opportunity, instead of just me reading books in my room, to invite people to actually, I can talk to them, and then to make it public. So that's also not just me doing something. So then it becomes also potentially, and then there is also quite some contributions from the public, which is kind of exciting and maybe destabilizes my thinking, which I do like. But so in this way, but I don't want to put limits to this. It can be something else, but then how to make it sustainable in long term. And maybe something I wanted to talk to you about is also the limits of freelance curating, which what you mentioned earlier. What did you mention earlier?
That I found that
the collaborations. That's what I was going to, this kind of being in conversation with people and collaborating with artists or people you feel close to on a longer term. And I feel like there is a limit to what extent you can do as a freelancer, because you always are reliant on a kind of, very simply, like a source of income, and that potentially comes from very different sources each time. and then how you can maintain these conversations when the conditions are changing.
Yeah. No, that in fact it would be better to have an institutional job to allow you to have those long-term conversations. That's what you mean? Yeah. I mean, a nice example of that or of is, Joey Tang and what he was saying with Fierce Pussy. Like, I really like that they're still in a conversation, and they've had like 3 exhibitions, potentially in our 4th, but they began with no plan. And like that to me, and with no platform either, that they could have been just a dinner and it could have been once, but to actually go in together into the unknown and just talk and then start from ground zero and build up. That sounds cool to me, because like also like in the case of Jory, like he is the outsider of the group. I don't know, I like that idea of doing something like that myself, like just to be part of something that's not something that I initiated. I feel like I think right now I'm at the place where I'd like to be told what to do. A little bit.
Yeah.
Not told what to do, because I would never respond well to that, but more like,
like you don't have to like all the time produce the content and framework.
Yeah.
But I also wonder, it made me think, like, what do you as a curator, I mean, don't mean you, but more abstractly, bring to the table, when you have a project like that? And also I'm continuously thinking about also power relations in the art. Like, even if I'm a freelancer, there is always one who extends an invitation, who generates things, who holds a certain responsibility. And I don't know, I'm just I realize like I'm self-sabotaging a lot in terms of my career in the art world. I made very consciously decisions that kind of make me also... that basically career decisions that don't really make sense from a perspective of one's advancements. But then I've been thinking a lot about how I always try to redistribute this power or kind of just get rid of it, but it's impossible. And then I'm like, who am I? And then am I just then, like a freeloader at this dinner table? So how to work with that, Am I just kind of sneaking into these situations that I want to be in, and am I just using my power to...
What? But what situation? Do you have a situation in
No,
mind?
I just imagine now this dinner table with Fierce Pussy and what I'm not talking about Joy, but then I'm imagining myself like...
For me, as a curator, I like, and I think this is why I like artworks, is because like for me it's easier to talk about what does the artwork do, and the relationship to the audience, and like and how my body feels in that relationship, and then thinking about the location, and then like how does the sun hit a particular time, or how do the sight lines work, or how do the works change when they're positioned in different ways, and I feel like that although artists think about those sort of things, they think about it from outward, and I feel like for me it's outward inward. You know what I mean? And like I feel like at the table, like just also kind of thinking about what makes an exhibition, and we will have the interview with Paul O'Neill, who also talks about in his work, maybe not in the interview but in lectures, about what makes an exhibition versus a room full of objects. And I think like the curator is integral from transforming the room full of objects or not objects, or whatever these material body, these artworks into an exhibition. And like you don't have to be a freelance curator or an institutional curator to be able to do that.
Yeah, sure. But it also comes with these responsibilities. I don't want to dismiss that curators do have some skills, and
but also the power dynamic. But I don't know. I feel like sometimes. I mean, I don't know what artists will think about this, but I feel like in the relationships I have with artists is that they have to kind of accept me into their work for it to be able to work. And it's really, 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 really nice when an artist does that, because they want to know what you think. And I'm always surprised. I'm like, oh, you want me to, why do I, well, you know, no, not like, but just like, oh, like, should I use this material, that material? It's like, oh, like, I don't even, sometimes I'm kind of like speechless because I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about how my body will be in the room. Whereas it's hard when an artist doesn't want to accept you into the process because they already have such a good idea of how their work is going to be. They can't articulate it until they're in the room. Yeah. And so like that's what I find hard in terms of a power dynamic, because suddenly I feel like I have to say, oh, but I'm the curator. Like I have to make decisions, like, because I do believe that there is a difference between artistic decisions and curatorial decisions, and then the line can be very, very thin.
Yeah, blurry.
And so blurry. And like sometimes I have to catch myself when I am like, oh, I think this might be an artistic decision, but I'm not yet good enough, feeling comfortable enough to say to an artist, oh, I think what you've just done
depends on the relation. And I think when you can have this kind of relation of, actually that's the exchange maybe that I'm so much interested in, then, you know, that can be really beautiful. And
but I do feel like it's cultural as well. Like I think like in France, for example, I've come to realize that a curator is like kind of like the big shot, which I don't feel like is the way it is here. I'm certainly not in Australia. Like the curator is really revered in this whole relationship. And I have been in a situation where I've been treated in a way that I think I have the power. They think I have the power and trying to take it away from me. And I'm like, but I don't have the power. Like, I'm just the curator.
I'm just a small curator.
Yeah. I'm just like, what do you... And like, that's been a shock. But on the other hand, it's been really nice when working with artists that have, like, really want to have the curator in that high position because they always want you to be there.
Yeah.
And like, you know, whenever there's an interview or a walkthrough, like I'm thinking of Shanta Rao, like who I had a show with last year, like, and she's a French artist, and like every move she made, she would make sure that I was involved, whether I thought it was necessary or not. And that's nice but not when I'm like suddenly.
I like this level of I like this kind of relationship where also when you're allowed to come so close to someone's thinking and work, and when you can really understand someone's work.
Yeah.
And that takes time. And I feel like also, okay, again, I'm getting into this like bashing of the art, but we're not allowed to have so much time to do that. Like I had this one exhibition that's supposed to open in May 2020. It didn't. And then it got postponed 7+ times. It opened in a different venue. I mean, this was like great, and everybody stayed on board. That's even greater. But then I felt when it's opened in December last year that it really benefited from these 1.5 years, even though I felt like this was a ready to go show. Like we were in the production process when actually the first lockdown came. And then I could understand how much closer I became with many of the works. A lot of things shifted. There were new productions, some new productions that completely transformed. And I don't know, I just felt, actually you need sort of these 3 years of preparation for a large project of this scale to make something that's really... works well. I think it works well.
No, but I think that's also something I agree with that, because like I think one thing that I've always been anxious about is like being like, because we talked about the difference between an artist orientated curator, which is what you see you are, and I
the binary,
and I being the object orientated curator. And for me, and like what has always I've been resisted being artist focused is because I feel like I feel I feel scared about what I could do wrong in that relationship. But that's because I was thinking about it short term. Now thinking about it in long term. So like I opened a show at the beginning of this year with an artist who we were supposed to open the show in 2020. And I've been working with her before that since 2016. And like the work that she's made now in the show of 2022, it speaks very much to the work she first made in 2016. They're not the same, but I can see the connection. And I asked her like, oh, like, what are you like? Were you thinking about that work? And she's like, well, no, I wasn't, but now I see it, and that's cool. I think to be able to be like, wow, like this and also when it's a younger artist or emerging artist now, an established artist, you know, I still feel like I'm in the same place as I was in 2016, but then seeing a practice that like really is developing and flourishing, it's like, oh, that also is, I'm also in that too, like blooming. And so I really like that. I would like to, if I can have a relationship with an artist over like a decade, that rather than just one commissioned work.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's where...
And also then it somehow feels more meaningful when you get to know someone's practice, you know, also historically.
Yes.
Are given the time to really see the trajectory and the ways of working. I think that's really great. It also reminds me what we talked about with Lara Caldi when Lara mentioned how it also can work, this kind of curatorial artist relationship the other way around, when she worked with much more established artists who actually took her on, and you know, you can also learn a lot from that relationship, which is oftentimes not acknowledged, maybe.
I agree. Like I think what I like about working with older artists is that they also like, they're willing to risk in a way that perhaps they wouldn't risk in a way if they were a younger artist. But also they're so generous with kind of letting you figure it out in a way. I mean, I'm thinking of like Joseph Grigley, for example. Jason and I, with Shimmer, have only worked with him once, but the relationship was really like, I still benefit from the conversations that we've had via email. And I still think about the way he works and how that's influenced the way we work, and that feels really good. Like, you know, like, I mean, he's not such an older artist. I mean, he's only 6.
He's established.
Yeah.
Of course, that's an age thing, but it's also, you know, a kind of like how much you are established in the art world. So I feel like it's more thinking about it in terms of being established and then sharing that spotlight or not in a way.
Yeah. No, it's, but I think in this last few months, like I really want to work with artists that are in my age group. Or like from between 25, not to say I'm 25, but 25 to 45, or maybe 25 to 55. There's something about these conversations that I've been having with artists and curators that I feel like we really get each other at the moment. And I don't know if it's a pandemic thing or it's that we're at a certain stage in our life where we're kind of feeling a bit confident, but not yet like, I don't know. I feel like most of the artists that I'm working with right now are in that age range, and like it feels really good. There's a sort of self-confidence that is coming out in these conversations that, you know, like there's always so much self-editing once upon a time. But do you think that there's been anything else in the since these last 2.5 years that we started this podcast that has changed for you?
I got a dog.
Yeah.
Which is also fantastic, actually. It's very hard for me not to talk about my dog, but it's not about my dog. It's also about the kind of social network, social connections that facilitated how the love for my dog expands and outwards. And yeah, we call her like the love communist Fifi.
So cute.
But Yeah, what else changed? I don't know. I think I would like to write more, work with publications more, but I'm also, working with publications is such a solitary practice that I feel it ties me to my laptop to even more than I am already. And then it makes me feel like how to rethink like an editorial process that's more lively. So I guess that's what I'm thinking about, how to bring or how to kind of mash up even more my curatorial and editorial practice, which is actually, I mean, I always look at the book like the way I would look at an exhibition or whatever project. So there's not like a weird description, but then the way how things are produced. So how to actually break that production mechanism that it's more open.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, this is abstract, but I have some ideas.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. So that would be for our next interview.
I hope I can return to this and report.
Yeah, because I mean, in our first conversation, you talked about wanting to be more into the publishing. So that certainly, if that was a goal,
how to make myself more precarious. Let's get into publishing. Yeah. And is there anything else for you that's changed?
I feel like it's harder to be a freelance curator. I think it's because of the pandemic that I feel like I have so many ideas for shows that I don't know where to take them. And like I am sort of sick of contacting places or talking to people about possible shows and nothing happening. And like I am wondering what to do. And like, I mean, I have Shimmer, but Shimmer is not where I take my own curatorial projects. I don't want to do that either. I want to be able to experiment and try out shows in other locations with other kinds of light and that sort of thing. So I'm sort of wondering what's going to happen to me. And because like, I mean, I've got a show in June, but like that's one, and I usually have 2 happening, which I find to be good. 2 shows a year, freelance shows is enough with everything else going on. And so I wonder what I'm going to do, because it would be and the kind of I've lost my motivation to just go, hey, like I've got this idea for a show. Are you interested? And like what are other ways of doing that? Because there are other curators that get like constantly being invited to do shows, and they are institutional curators on top of their freelancing. So I'm wondering what is it that I need to do to change
your brand.
No,
well, it's also to what end, do you want to make so many shows? Because of course, and I go back one step, we talked about earlier, I don't know if I said this on record actually or not, but I experience very much the limits of freelance curating in a sense of what I mentioned earlier in terms of this continuity, like how your circumstances change and the context change all the time. So it's very hard to maintain that, but also in a way I feel professionally I'm really for a while already at this like stepping stone, like, okay girl, move up, and I'm just constantly kind of resisting that, like not really applying for institutional jobs, not at all. I should be like curating some biennial stuff, and I'm just like, no thank you. So it also feels like just working on a project basis and making freelance shows, or even if it's not an exhibition, freelance project, it's not sustainable. And at one point, it's also I'm becoming less desirable because I'm kind of older and I'm not, also just physically not able to do as much as I used to like 10 years ago or 5 years ago even. And so there is that. And like I'm maybe not so interested in my desirability anymore, but then this sounds weird, but then the art world does operate, the big art world, like it's kind of the big O's, but it does operate on that currency, right? Your desirability and...
Sorry,
And your baby is coming.
I think he's crying.
Your baby desires you. And that's the episode. In the next one, we interview curator Sara Giannini on her practice, the platform she creates for her work, and how she sees curating from the perspective of a semiotician.
If you have feedback, we'd love to receive your email at ihopethismessagefindsyouwell@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at ihopethismessage and find us on SoundCloud under the same name. Our jingle was by the artist duo Momo Noez, and our sound engineer is Nick Thomas.